Let's jump right into it. Number 5. The War of the Triple Alliance, also known as the Paraguayan War, from 1864 to 1870. This conflict was so devastating it literally erased Paraguay from the map as a functioning country. Imagine if a war today killed 90% of your nation's male population. That's exactly what happened here. Paraguay, led by Francisco Solano Lopez, decided to take on Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay all at once. Think of it like Luxembourg declaring war on Germany, France, and Belgium simultaneously. The audacity was staggering, but the consequences were even more so. Before this war, Paraguay was actually one of South America's most prosperous nations. They had railways, telegraph lines, and iron foundries, when most of their neighbors were still figuring out basic infrastructure. Lopez thought his modernized military could punch above its weight. He was catastrophically wrong. The war didn't just redraw borders, it fundamentally altered the demographic makeup of an entire nation. Paraguay went from having 525,000 people to barely 221,000 survivors. The country lost nearly 70% of its entire population. Today's Paraguay, landlocked and struggling economically, exists because this war stripped away its access to crucial river ports and reduced its territory by roughly 25%. Those lost lands went to Brazil and Argentina, shaping the modern map of South America in ways most people never realize. Number 4. The Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905. This was the conflict that proved the age of European dominance was ending, and it completely scrambled the power dynamics in East Asia. Picture this scenario. Everyone expects the heavyweight boxer to demolish the newcomer, but instead, the newcomer lands a knockout punch that changes boxing forever. Russia was the heavyweight here, a massive European empire stretching across 11 time zones. Japan was the newcomer, a small island nation that had only opened to the world 50 years earlier. When Japan obliterated the Russian Baltic Fleet at the Battle of Tsushima, it sent shockwaves around the globe. This wasn't just a military victory, it was a psychological earthquake. For the first time in centuries, an Asian power had decisively defeated a European empire. The immediate border changes were significant. Russia lost the southern half of Sakhalin Island to Japan and had to abandon its expansion into Manchuria. But the real impact was far more profound. This war established Japan as a regional superpower and set the stage for everything that followed in the Pacific. Without this victory, there's no Japanese expansion into Korea, no Manchurian incident, and arguably no Pacific theater in World War II. The modern borders of Korea, parts of China, and even the eventual division of Korea all trace back to Japan's emergence as a major power in this forgotten conflict. Russia, meanwhile, turned its attention westward, contributing to the tensions that would spark World War I. Number 3. The War of the Pacific from 1879 to 1884. No, not the World War II Pacific Theater, but a conflict that completely redrew the map of South America and made one country incredibly wealthy while leaving another landlocked forever. This was essentially a war fought over bird droppings, but those bird droppings were worth more than gold. The Atacama Desert was covered in guano, the accumulated excrement of millions of seabirds over thousands of years. This sounds ridiculous until you realize that guano was the world's premium fertilizer, crucial for feeding growing populations in the industrial age. Think of it like discovering massive oil reserves today. Chile, Bolivia, and Peru all claim parts of this desert, but when tax disputes erupted, Chile decided to settle things militarily. Chile's strategy was brilliant and ruthless. They used their superior navy to control the coastline, then systematically conquered the inland territories. The Treaty of Ancon in 1883 gave Chile the entire Atacama Desert region, including the crucial nitrate deposits. Bolivia lost its entire Pacific coastline, becoming permanently landlocked. Peru lost its southernmost provinces. This single conflict explains why Chile is that long, narrow country stretching down South America's coast, and why Bolivia today has no access to the sea despite having a navy. The wealth from nitrate exports made Chile the richest country in South America for decades. Bolivia never recovered economically, and to this day, they still maintain a navy and formally request sea access in international forums. The modern economic disparities between these nations can be traced directly to the Guano War. Number 2. The Crimean War of 1853 to 1856. This conflict fundamentally altered the balance of power in Europe and the Middle East, but most people only remember it for the charge of the Light Brigade or Florence Nightingale. The real story is how this war shattered the old European order and redrew the map in ways that still matter today. The war started over who controlled Christian holy sites in Jerusalem, but it quickly became about something much bigger. Whether Russia would dominate the declining Ottoman Empire. Britain and France couldn't allow Russian expansion into the Mediterranean, so they allied with the Ottomans in what seemed like an impossible partnership. Christian powers fighting alongside the Islamic Ottoman Empire against Christian Russia was unprecedented. The fighting was brutal and incompetent on all sides. More soldiers died from disease than bullets, and military leadership was so poor it became legendary for all the wrong reasons. But the consequences were enormous. The Treaty of Paris didn't just end the war, it fundamentally restructured European politics. Russia was banned from having a navy in the Black Sea, effectively neutering their sudden expansion for decades. The Ottoman Empire gained Western protection, extending its life by several decades. This delay in Ottoman collapse changed everything about how the Middle East would eventually be divided. Without the Crimean War, Russia might have conquered Constantinople decades earlier, completely altering the development of modern Turkey, Greece, and the Balkans. The modern borders of Romania, Bulgaria, and Serbia all reflect the power arrangements established by this conflict. Number 1. The Chaco War between Paraguay and Bolivia from 1932 to 1935. This was South America's bloodiest 20th century conflict, and it perfectly demonstrates how wrong everyone can be about everything. Two of the continent's poorest countries fought a devastating war over a worthless piece of land that everyone thought contained vast oil reserves. Spoiler alert, it didn't. The Gran Chaco was a massive, largely uninhabited wilderness between Paraguay and Bolivia. Both countries were broke, both had lost previous wars, and both desperately needed something to go right. When geologists suggested the Chaco might contain oil, it sparked an arms race between two nations that could barely afford armies. Paraguay had lost 70% of its territory in previous wars and was still recovering from demographic catastrophe. Bolivia had lost its Pacific coast and was landlocked and struggling. Neither country could actually afford a war, but both were convinced this wasteland held the key to their futures. The fighting was surreal. Soldiers battled in temperatures exceeding 120 degrees Fahrenheit, limited water supplies. More troops died from thirst and heat than from enemy fire. Both sides used borrowed money to buy weapons from European arms dealers who were happy to profit from South American desperation. Paraguay, the smaller and poorer country, somehow won decisively. They captured most of the disputed territory and took 21,000 Bolivian prisoners. The final borders gave Paraguay about 75% of the Chaco region. Here's the kicker. Comprehensive geological surveys after the war confirmed there was no significant oil in the region. Both countries had bankrupted themselves fighting over empty land. Bolivia's defeat in the Chaco contributed to political instability that eventually brought revolutionary governments to power. Paraguay's victory gave them badly needed territory, but at enormous cost. The modern border between these countries exists because 100,000 people died fighting over a mirage in the desert. I'll make similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.